The park was silent that cold autumn morning, the golden leaves dancing gently in the wind, but Elisa couldn't feel the warm breeze or the scent of the flowers that still stubbornly bloomed. Her eyes were teary, her vision blurred by a mix of pain and despair. She sank into the worn wooden bench as if trying to disappear, to hide from the reality that crushed her with its immense weight. What had happened to her? How had a young woman full of dreams and hopes, with an entire future ahead, come to this point? Her stomach tightened with a growing emptiness, and life seemed to have lost all meaning. Her boyfriend, John, had left her with a simple gesture, a door that closed without explanations, without a backward glance. He didn't look back, didn't hesitate, he just walked away. The previous afternoon was still vivid in her memory, like an incessant torture that wouldn't let her be. She had given herself to John completely in love, and now he was gone, leaving her with cruel words that echoed in her mind. "It's not my problem, dear. I'm not ready to be a father." He looked at her with disdain, as if her condition were a shame, something he couldn't bear, and moved on with his life as if nothing had changed. But she couldn't just move on. She was expecting a baby. John's baby, from whom he now recoiled as if she were a contagious disease. Elisa's belly, still small, hardly showed any signs of the new life growing inside her, but she felt every movement, every beat of that tiny heart as a constant reminder that, despite everything, she was not alone. There was an intense connection, a strength emerging from that defenseless being she carried, and somehow it kept her grounded. Yet the loneliness was overwhelming. The pain of being left behind, of being abandoned, consumed her chest with a force that made her muscles tighten. She looked at her palms, trying to control the sobs that seemed to erupt from the depths of her soul. Each tear that fell not only provided momentary relief, but also heightened the sense that she was losing something even more important, a life she hadn't even met yet. The past felt irretrievably distant. Her college life, her friendships, her projects, all of it was now turning to ashes in the fire of rejection. The university had been the first to act against her. "Sorry, Elisa, but we can't allow you to stay here. The situation is unsustainable." She had been expelled from the dormitory, with no chance to defend her condition or find a space to start over. The university that should have been her future, which she had chosen with such effort, had no room for a young, pregnant woman. The reality that there was no one to turn to made her soul shrink even further. There was no family to extend a hand. Her parents, who had distanced themselves for personal reasons, were not there. She found herself alone in a cold, impersonal city, feeling as if the whole world had turned its back on her. Her only possession was the apartment she had shared with John, but he, without hesitation, had kicked her out since the property was in his name. There were no financial resources, and the empty promises of "let's try to make it work" were now buried in the sharp, heartless words he had hurled at her. "Now it's every man for himself," he had said with a chill she could never have imagined. She wanted to scream, wanted to curse that man who had shattered her heart, but the words simply wouldn't come. All that was left was to cry. And it was there, alone on a vacant park bench, that her life began to reconfigure in a way she had never anticipated. The future was still uncertain, but the weight of loneliness felt more bearable as her tears subsided, giving way to a sense that something would change. Perhaps it wouldn't be what she expected, but life, in one way or another, moved forward. "Elisa, oh my God, what happened?" Samantha's voice brought her back to reality. It was a friend, someone Elisa knew she could trust. Samantha, her former roommate, had always been the kind of person who instinctively embraced life's difficulties with a generous heart and an understanding that came from knowing what it was like to struggle. Elisa turned to her, her expression a reflection of anguish and shame. Samantha's eyes were wide, and the horror on her face was impossible to disguise. I don't know what to do," Elisa stammered, trying to find the words. She felt powerless, like a lost child in the midst of a storm. With a gentle motion, Samantha hugged her, pulling her against her chest with the strength only someone who had endured many battles could show. "Don't worry, you're going to get through this. I'm here, and we'll find a solution. Samantha had always been practical, always knowing how to take something from paper and turn it into reality. And so, with a broken heart but a sharp mind, she began to think of alternatives. She knew Elisa needed more than just emotional support. She needed a way out, something concrete, something that would give Elisa not only a chance to start over, but also dignity. Look, I have an idea. I'll talk to my aunt. She knows a man, Michael Redford, a respected businessman. He has a big house and needs someone to help with personal care. He recently suffered an accident and needs someone to organize the house, prepare meals, and assist with some daily activities. Samantha didn't hesitate, and Elisa, still dazed, felt a spark of hope. Michael Redford was a name she had never heard before, but the idea of getting off the streets and having a roof over her head seemed like an opportunity she couldn't afford to pass up. Samantha gave her an encouraging smile. I'm going to call her now. We'll take the first step, and no matter what happens after that, you're not alone anymore. As Elisa watched Samantha's movements, observing her friend's unwavering confidence, a new and unfamiliar feeling washed over her. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was something akin to possibility, a chance, a future where she could find not only safety, but perhaps even something more, something she hadn't imagined before, something beginning to form in those difficult moments when she thought the end was the only path forward. Samantha's phone rang, and the ensuing conversation felt surreal. But soon, Elisa knew she would have an opportunity, a chance to bring her child into a space where she could be cared for, where the weight of loneliness and pain would begin to lift, replaced by something more nurturing. The first step toward a new life was about to be taken. Elisa looked at the grand wrought-iron gate before her, the intricate details forming elegant, almost imposing patterns. Each iron bar seemed a promise of wealth and status, but also of something more. A life completely different from the one she knew, a life that now stretched out before her as an unexpected possibility. It was impossible not to feel a mix of admiration and anxiety. She had never imagined she would end up here, in Beverly Hills, in front of a mansion that seemed more like a work of art than a mere residence. The path to the door was flanked by a lush garden, with perfectly manicured plants, flowering shrubs intertwining with leafy trees, and even a small ornamental lake, with swans gliding gracefully over the crystal-clear water. Every detail of the landscape reflected the luxury and care lavished on this place, and Elisa felt small in the face of such grandeur. She had never been in a place like this, so far removed from her life as a student, now a woman, abandoned and pregnant. The doorbell chimed softly, almost like a melody, breaking the oppressive silence that enveloped Elisa. Her heart raced as she waited for a response, her hands sweating nervously. She smoothed her thrift store dress, simple yet comfortable, and took a deep breath. She had no idea how this meeting with Michael Redford would unfold, but there was no turning back. It was either this worked out, or she would be alone and adrift once again. When the door finally opened, she was a bit surprised. The man before her wasn't what she had expected. He didn't have that aura of coldness and distance that she somehow imagined wealthy people would possess. Michael Redford had something warm and genuine about him that contrasted with the grandeur of the house and surroundings. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, but his posture was calm, almost relaxed, as if he were accustomed to welcoming people into his home without the pretense of superiority. "You must be Elisa," he said with a gentle smile, his light brown eyes shining with sincere curiosity. "I'm Michael Redford. Please, come in." The softness of his voice made Elisa relax a little, and as she crossed the threshold, she felt enveloped by a sensation of warmth and welcome, something she hadn't felt in a long time. The foyer of the mansion, with its shining marble floor, walls adorned with paintings by renowned artists, and elegant furniture, felt like another world, a world where she felt out of place, but also protected. "Thank you for having me, Mr. Redford," she said hesitantly, trying to maintain her composure as her eyes scanned the details of the environment. "My friend Samantha explained my situation." "Yes, she told me," Michael gently interrupted, gesturing for her to follow him. "Come, please. I imagine you're tired from your journey." The way he addressed her was calm and respectful, without urgency, without that impatience Elisa had often felt in other settings. It was as if he genuinely wanted to get to know her, not just hire her for a service. They walked into an elegant office with dark wood-paneled walls and shelves filled with books and a large Persian rug covering the floor. Michael offered her a comfortable chair beside his desk, and Elisa, with a tense smile, settled into it. "So, Elisa," Michael began, sitting in his leather chair, "I know what happened to you. Samantha explained your situation to me. There's nothing worse than being left behind, especially when you're pregnant. I want to help you, but first, tell me more about yourself. What do you like to do? What motivates you?" Elisa didn't expect such an open approach. Usually when people offered help, they only saw the need in front of them, like a problem to be solved, without trying to understand the person behind the need. But Michael seemed genuinely interested in her. He didn't see her as a case to fix, but as a person. This made Elisa lower her guard, at least for a moment. She took a deep breath and began to speak, which became easier as the words flowed. She talked about her dreams of becoming a psychologist, how she always wanted to help others, understand their pain, and offer solutions. She mentioned college, her hopes for a different future, and how everything seemed to collapse so quickly. She spoke about John and the shock of being left alone, but also about her gratitude for Samantha, who had rescued her from the brink of despair. Michael listened attentively without interruptions, just nodding as if he were absorbing every word, not just to understand her situation, but to know the essence of who she was. When she finished, he looked at her for a long moment before leaning closer, a slight smile on his lips. "Elisa," he began with a softness that surprised her even more, "the truth is that you're not alone. I know what it's like to face challenges, and I want you to know that here you can rebuild. I'm not just offering you a job. I'm offering you a space where you can live with dignity, a place where you can take care of yourself and your child without fear, without hurry. I'm an older man, and I recently suffered an accident that has left me with some limitations. I need help with some daily tasks. I can offer you a fixed position as my personal caregiver. This will include preparing meals, assisting with my therapy regimen, and even helping with some household tasks. I know it's a job, but it will also be an opportunity for you to stabilize yourself, even start rebuilding your own dreams." Elisa fell silent for a few seconds, processing Michael's words. She felt a mix of disbelief and relief. She had never imagined finding someone willing to help her in such a way, without judgments, without restrictions. It was a gesture of pure generosity, an offer that felt magical in its simplicity. I don't know what to say," Elisa stammered, her voice filled with emotion. "This is more than I ever expected. I accept. I will do my best, Mr. Redford. I promise." Michael smiled broadly, a genuine smile that seemed to light up the entire room. "Don't worry. The most important thing now is that you and your child have the chance to start over. We'll take it one step at a time." And so, Elisa's destiny began to change. She accepted the offer, and in the following weeks, she found in Michael more than just an employer. He was a silent yet constant support, a man who treated her with dignity and respect, and who, little by little, began to become not just a source of security, but also of affection. With each passing day, she realized that here, in this vast and welcoming, luxurious refuge, she had something she had never imagined, the chance to be cared for and respected. And this, for Elisa, was the first step toward rediscovering her own strength. She knew that the future was still far from clear, but in that moment, she felt for the first time a gentle light of hope, something that sparked deep within her heart. The story of Elisa was just beginning to be rewritten. The months that followed the start of Elisa's new life in the Redford mansion were marked by a surprising tranquility. Each day seemed to bring a new type of learning, a new discovery. Elisa began to understand the small but significant gestures of Michael, gestures that made her realize he was not just an elderly man with physical limitations, but someone deeply compassionate, with a quiet wisdom that came from years of experiences and challenges. At first, she focused on the daily tasks, preparing meals, adjusting her routine to meet Mr. Redford's needs, and ensuring he strictly followed the therapy and exercise regimens recommended by his doctors. Michael, although a demanding patient, was never harsh or impatient. He had the rare ability to thank her for the small details, a well-prepared meal, the extra care she took to ensure he was comfortable during physiotherapy sessions. And over time, Elisa began to realize that these small gestures of acknowledgement were the foundations of something deeper, something she couldn't initially identify but felt growing inside her with each new smile, each new word of encouragement. There was a calmness in her relationship with Michael. Few words were needed. There was a silent communication between them, almost instinctual. When he was tired, she would help him settle into the armchair in front of the fireplace, adjusting the blanket over his shoulders with a tenderness he would never complain about. He reciprocated her small gestures with equally gentle actions, like that afternoon when he stepped away from the dinner table only to return with a small wooden box, a gift he didn't need to explain. "For you, Elisa, I know you love flowers," he said, opening the box to reveal a bouquet of dried flowers he had picked from his garden. It was a simple gesture, but it touched Elisa in an unexpected way. She was not used to this kind of attention. She, who had always been treated with indifference or even cruelty by those she loved, began to realize that Michael's words were not merely courtesy. They came from a place of genuine care, and slowly she started to let her defenses down. She didn't need to be strong all the time. There, with him, she could be vulnerable. As the months passed, Elisa's body began to change. Her belly grew week by week, and she started to feel the weight of her pregnancy, but also the miracle of new life growing inside her. There were moments when she would stand alone, gazing out the mansion's window, thinking about the future of the child she carried, and the life she was beginning to build there. But one thing she knew clearly: she was no longer alone. Michael, like a gentle and constant shadow, was there every day. He accompanied her to medical appointments, ensured she received the best prenatal care, and even hired a midwife to provide the necessary support during the birth. He became, without her immediately realizing it, a kind of pillar in her life. She had never imagined that the loneliness that had consumed her for so long would be broken by a man so different from John, so different from anyone she had ever known. One night, while she was in the kitchen preparing dinner, the sound of the door opening made her turn around. It was Michael, entering the room with a calm smile, but his eyes shining with something Elisa could not identify until then. He looked at her, hands dusted with flour from cooking, and without saying a word, he took a towel and dried her hands with a tenderness that made her heart race more than she would like to admit. "You look very beautiful, Elisa," he said with a gentle smile. It was not an empty or superficial compliment. It was a comment full of consideration, something he had said before, but with a different intensity in that moment. Elisa, who had always felt invisible to so many men in her life, felt warmth inside her, but at the same time, a sense of unease washed over her. Something was changing. That night, after a quiet dinner, while Elisa set the table for tea, she realized her heart was beginning to warm up to Michael in a way she could no longer ignore. It wasn't a whirlwind passion, but a deep connection, a bond of trust, respect, and perhaps even affection. He did not treat her as a fragile young woman, incapable, but as a strong woman capable of making her own decisions, of building a future, of being even a partner. It was one afternoon as they strolled through the gardens of the mansion that the subtle atmosphere of friendship transformed into something more tangible. The sky was clear, with the sun slowly setting on the horizon, bathing the garden in a golden hue. Michael was walking beside Elisa, their steps in harmony, when he suddenly stopped and looked at her with more intensity than she was used to. "Elisa," he said, his voice now soft but firm, "I can't keep pretending that I don't feel something more for you. I have fallen in love with you, not just for the woman you are, but for the mother you will be, for the incredible human being you have shown yourself to be. I want to be by your side, not just as your employer or friend, but as your partner. I know I am older. I know I have limitations, but I want to offer you my love, my loyalty, and ensure that you and little Lucas have everything you need." Elisa felt a tightness in her chest, her mind swirling with a mix of confusion and surprise. It was impossible not to see the sincerity in Michael's words, but what was he proposing? She looked at him, at the man with whom she had shared so many experiences, and for the first time in months she saw in him more than a caregiver or friend. She looked at Michael's face, his brown eyes shining with genuine tenderness, and in that moment she knew that what was at stake was more than just gratitude. She felt something for him too, something deeper and more enduring than any fleeting sensation. "Michael," she replied, her voice trembling, I don't know what to say. I care about you too, more than I ever imagined, but I need this to be real. I need it to be a partnership where we are both equals. I can't accept what was superficial in the past anymore." He smiled, with the understanding of someone who truly listens and sees the other person. "I just want what's best for you, Elisa, and if you give me this chance, I will do everything I can to ensure that you and Lucas are happy and safe." In that moment, Elisa knew her life would never be the same. She was finally finding something she had always desired but never thought possible. Genuine love based on respect, partnership, and the joint building of a future. Life in the Redford mansion seemed to have found a new normal, a gentle rhythm amid the everyday challenges and joys. Elisa's pregnancy progressed, and her belly grew each month with the promise of new life. Every movement of the baby was a reminder of the transformation happening in her body and life. She was alone in many ways, as a single mother with the responsibility of raising her child, but she was no longer alone in spirit. Michael was by her side, a firm and constant presence, seemingly lifting some of the weight she carried. However, despite all the help and affection she received, Eliza felt that her life was far from easy. Each step in her journey as a single mother seemed to come with a new obstacle to overcome. She knew she couldn't rely on Michael for everything, and the shadows of the past, those memories of abandonment and despair, began to resurface, especially on the quietest nights. On an ordinary day, while she was in the kitchen preparing dinner for Michael, she felt a pang of anxiety in her chest. She knew her situation was not simple, a baby on the way, without the support of her family, and the uncertainty of what the future would hold. She recognized that she was in a privileged position, having Michael at her side, but the insecurity of being a single mother was still very much alive in her mind. "Am I capable?" she wondered, looking at the pot on the stove, her thoughts drifting to the challenges that would come after Lucas was born. "Will I be able to raise this baby alone?" The mansion was too big for her to feel completely at ease. Sometimes, loneliness crept in on the nights when she sat alone in her room, gazing out the window. She thought about what her life might have been like if she had stayed in college, if she had followed her dreams, instead of getting lost in John's empty promises. But those were questions, no matter how much she pondered them, that no longer had answers. What mattered now was Lucas's future, and that depended on her. She knew that no matter how willing Michael was to help, the responsibility of being a mother was hers alone, and the love of a father, which she desperately wanted for her child, wouldn't come without effort. It was a summer afternoon when Elisa finally gave birth. The labor was long and exhausting, and as she was in the delivery room, she felt a mix of anxiety and hope with each contraction that coursed through her body. When the baby was finally placed in her arms, all the fatigue and pain vanished in an instant. Lucas, with Michael Michael's light brown eyes and the dark hair she had imagined countless times, cried softly as she cradled him lovingly. It was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when her child finally arrived, giving her a purpose stronger than anything else. "Welcome to the world, Lucas," she whispered with tears of emotion in her eyes. "You are everything I've always wanted." After being discharged, Elisa returned to the mansion with Lucas, now a newborn, small and vulnerable, with a sense that the real battle was just beginning. The first weeks of Lucas's life were a mix of pure happiness and complete exhaustion. The newborn, like all babies, kept her up at night, demanding her attention, and Elisa felt the fatigue weighing heavily on her shoulders. However, there was something about the way Michael approached her during those times, always with a kind word or gesture that calmed her. He would watch her, but never interfere. He respected her role as a mother, but whenever she needed, he was there, ready to help. It was during this period that Elisa realized just how much Michael cared for her and little Lucas. He had transformed one of the rooms in the house into a true sanctuary for the baby. Delicate furniture, soft curtains, and a peaceful atmosphere. He hired a specialized nurse to assist with postpartum care, and when Elisa needed a break, Michael didn't hesitate to hold Lucas in his arms, allowing her a moment of peace. Yet not all the support she received could silence the questions that began to surface. Elisa started to feel deep within her the weight of expectations. She didn't want in any way to be seen as a single mother who needs help from a rich man, as some of her friends had insinuated, even though she knew that, to some extent, she depended on Michael more than she would like to admit. He offered her what she needed most, security, but her independence, that spark of autonomy she had always possessed, was a flame she feared was slowly extinguishing. One afternoon, while Michael was busy in his office and Lucas was sleeping in his crib, Elisa found herself alone in the mansion's library. She wandered through the empty halls and, unintentionally, stopped in front of the bookshelf that held the books Michael loved so much. Pulling one out, she began to leaf through the pages with her mind occupied, reflecting on what her life would look like moving forward. She began to write, something she hadn't done in years. The words flowed out seamlessly, almost like a catharsis. "I always imagined myself somewhere different. I didn't know it would be here, with him, with Lucas. I hoped to be more. I wanted to be more. But maybe this is what I've always needed. A chance to be the mother my child deserves." And as she wrote, an idea began to form. She needed to reclaim her sense of identity. She didn't want to live in Michael's shadow, but she couldn't do it alone. She wanted to create her own future, based not only on the lessons of the past, but on the strength of being a mother, and, perhaps later, a wife. However, this achievement did not come without its challenges. The unexpected happened when, 6 months after Lucas's birth, Elisa received an unwanted visit, a ghost from the past that would change everything she had built. The doorbell rang, and upon opening the door, she came face to face with John, the man who had left her alone, pregnant, with empty promises and a cruel departure. Their eyes met for an instant, and Elisa felt a wave of anger, sadness, and disbelief. John hadn't changed. He stood there before her, wearing an arrogant smile and an expression that immediately made her feel vulnerable. He seemed to believe he could still toy with her feelings. "You still owe me, Elisa," he said with a disdainful smile, glancing inside the house and noticing for the first time the comfort and wealth surrounding them. "Did you think you could just get rid of me like that?" What followed would be a confrontation that would cause Elisa to rethink her relationship with Michael and the life she was building. John's words struck at her deepest insecurities. She had been abandoned by him, but what did he want now? Before she could respond, a firm, authoritative voice emerged from behind her. It was Michael, who had approached unnoticed. "I think you came to the wrong place, John," he said, his calm voice carrying a firmness that made her tremble. "Elisa and the baby are my responsibility now. If you have nothing more to say, I suggest you leave." John looked at Michael, incredulous, but his stance was clear. He was there to protect Elisa and their child, no matter what happened. With her heart racing and the weight on her shoulders feeling even heavier, Elisa knew that this would only be the beginning of a new fight. but for the first time she felt strong enough to face it. After all, she was no longer alone. The house was quieter than usual, with the gentle clinking of dishes and cups breaking the morning tranquility. Elisa sat at the kitchen table, a place that, ironically, had become her refuge, not only because it was where she prepared meals for Michael and the kids, but also because it offered her a moment of peace away from the relentless demands of daily life. Lucas, now 6 months old, was in his high chair, happily banging his small hands on the table, his baby laughter filling the room with contagious joy. Benjamin, the family's pet dog, was by his side trying to reach the crumbs of bread that the little one accidentally dropped. Elisa couldn't help but smile at the scene, a clear reflection of how much her life had changed since she arrived at the Redford mansion. As she watched Lucas playing with his stuffed toy and listened to his giggles, a deep sense of gratitude washed over her. She knew that although motherhood was challenging and often lonely, she had 2 precious reasons to keep going. 2 little ones who illuminated her world in a way she had never imagined possible. Her relationship with Michael had become a solid foundation for the family they were building, but her connection with her children was the true source of her strength. The growth of Lucas and Elisa's doubts. Lucas was growing quickly. With each passing day, he seemed more curious, more aware of the world around him. He was starting to crawl, his tiny movements like the first steps of a journey that seemed to have no end. Elisa was amazed at how the little one reacted to her touch and the sound of her voice. Every word he attempted to babble filled her heart with hope, as if he were a promise that no matter how hard things got, love and happiness would always find a way. However, even though motherhood was filling a space in Elisa's heart, moments of doubt began to surface. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, while breastfeeding Lucas or rocking him to sleep, she couldn't help but think, "Am I doing the right thing?" The abandonment she had experienced haunted her like a shadow, and she feared that her son might one day feel the weight of the loneliness she had endured. "Am I ready to be a mother? Am I good enough?" were questions that echoed silently in her mind. And although she knew she was doing her best, there was an unsettling feeling in her heart. As much as Michael was a calming presence and helped in many areas, Elisa still felt the responsibility of being the mother Lucas deserved. It was a delicate balance. The love for her son, immeasurable and unconditional, was being tested by the pressures of being a single mother, even if she was surrounded by material wealth and support from all sides. Above all, she found herself in a constant search for something deeper, a true connection that went beyond material care, encompassing the emotional understanding and support Lucas would need as he grew. The arrival of Benjamin and the family bond. On a particularly hectic day, while Elisa was in the garden arranging some flowers, Michael appeared with a large box. He looked excited, almost like a child. "I have a surprise for you and Lucas," he said, a mischievous smile on his face. Elisa looked on curiously, and upon opening the box, her eyes lit up. Inside was an adorable puppy with brown and white fur, who immediately jumped into her hands, eager for affection. Lucas's face brightened as soon as he saw it. He loved animals, and over time, the little Benjamin, named by Michael, quickly became a beloved member of the family. The puppy brought a new energy to the house, as if it were a constant reminder of the growing bond between them. It wasn't just a pet. It symbolized that no matter how difficult life had been for Elisa up to that point, she had found her place. Now she was not only caring for Michael and Lucas, but also had a vital role for Benjamin, which made her feel like her life was taking a direction worth pursuing. As Elisa watched Lucas play with the puppy, she understood that their family was shaping itself more organically than she could have imagined. The simple act of caring for and loving someone, whether a child or an animal, was healing her internal wounds and helping fill the emptiness she had felt for so long. The unexpected visit from John. However, the beginning of a new family routine was interrupted by an unexpected visit. The figure of John, the ex-boyfriend who had left Elisa pregnant and alone, reappeared in her life. The shock was significant, not just for her, but for Michael as well. The feeling of rejection that Elisa had experienced from John had faded over time, but the ghost of the past soon resurfaced, bringing all the old pains back to the surface. She was in the living room with Lucas in her arms when the doorbell rang. Elisa furrowed her brow. Who could that be now? When she opened the door, her stomach churned at the sight of John standing there, his arrogant demeanor and the gaze she knew all too well. He looked even more intoxicated by pride and resentment. "Do you think you can live here as if nothing ever happened?" John said, surveying the luxurious house and the perfect tableau that seemed to unfold before him. "Do you think you can hide from everyone that the child you're carrying isn't Michael's?" The pain and hatred in his words were palpable. Elisa took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure in the face of the avalanche of accusations he was hurling at her. However, the prevailing feeling within her was one of compassion, not for the situation he had left her in, but for the bitterness that still consumed his soul. "John, you have nothing to do with my life anymore or with my son," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the rising anger. "Lucas is my son, and he has a father now. I have nothing more to say to you." It was then that Michael entered the room, his imposing and calm presence contrasting sharply with John's turbulent energy. Michael's gaze was clear and resolute. "There's no more room for you here, John," he said in a low voice, but filled with authority. "Elisa and Lucas are my family now. It's best for you to leave." The tension in the air was palpable, but John had no choice but to retreat. His eyes widened, and he shot one last look of disdain before turning his back and leaving the mansion. Elisa felt a sigh of relief escape her, but there was also an unease that made her question what would come next. Now, she knew that the peace she had achieved was still fragile, but at the same time she felt stronger than ever. What mattered, in the end, was that she had herself, her son and Michael, and no longer the shadow of a painful past. The future would be shaped by her and by them, together. As night fell, enveloping the house in silence, Elisa realized a fundamental truth. She was no longer the abandoned and lonely girl. She was a mother, a strong woman, with a family she had chosen, and with that certainty, she was ready to face whatever the future had in store. The Redford mansion had never felt so alive. The light streaming through the large windows on spring mornings, the laughter of children echoing through the halls, the delicious smell of cookies baking in the kitchen, all of it seemed to create an atmosphere of harmony, a stark contrast to the solitude Elisa had once experienced. Now she felt that life in her new home was becoming richer and fuller with each passing day. But while the house bustled with activity, inside Elisa there was a whirlwind of emotions. Each day brought a new lesson, a new challenge, and often a lingering doubt about her place in this new world. Elisa's transformation since arriving at the Redford mansion was something she could hardly believe herself. When she sat at the table with Michael and the children, watching them eat and talk, she felt warmth in her heart, a sense that the suffering she had endured was not in vain. Michael, for his part, was deeply committed to making this new life more comfortable for her and Lucas. He was attentive, present, and somehow seemed to understand her emotional needs with a precision Elisa had never imagined was possible. Yet there was something more, something she couldn't quite articulate, something that no matter how hard she tried to ignore it, always surfaced at the most unexpected moments. The challenge of being part of the family. Elisa still wondered if she truly belonged in this new life or if she was just passing through. Even though Michael and the children treated her with affection, the age difference between her and Michael and her position as a worker in that house often left her with a sense of an invisible barrier between them. It was a silent conflict she carried with her, a doubt about her own legitimacy in the place she occupied, even as the mother of Michael's child. Lucas, now a year old, was beginning to show a charming personality. His growing curiosity about the world around him was a constant source of fascination for Elisa. She loved spending mornings playing with him in the garden, teaching him simple words, pointing out colorful flowers and the singing birds in the trees. But as she watched her son grow, with the light brown eyes she was beginning to recognize as Michael's, she also felt a pang of fear. What if Lucas grew up and realized he didn't share the same last name as his father? What if one day he wondered why his story was different from those of other children? These questions hammered in her mind, and Elisa didn't know how to cope with the answers. Still, there was a growing peace in their daily interactions. When she looked at Michael, she saw not only the man who offered her shelter and security, but also someone who genuinely wanted to be part of Lucas's life. The love she was beginning to feel for him was not just a byproduct of the material security he provided, but also of the generosity of spirit he demonstrated each day. The weight of the age difference. As time passed, Elisa also began to reflect more on the age difference between her and Michael. When he spoke about his childhood, his memories and experiences, Elisa often found herself admiring how he seemed to have lived so many lives before her. The conversations about politics, history and literature, the long discussions about Michael's business future, all seemed to come with an authority that only experience could provide. While she admired this wisdom, there was also a sense of disconnection. Elisa wondered if she would be able to keep up with the pace of the life Michael had built, especially when he began discussing future projects, his vision for a perfect family. It wasn't just the knowledge or experience that seemed to separate the two. It was the difference in worldviews, in perspectives. Elisa was still young, with simple dreams, and often questioned whether her place was truly beside a man who had lived enough to know what he wanted from life. He had already built his fortune. He had already been through ups and downs. For him, perhaps the pursuit of stability was the priority. But Elisa felt she was just beginning to understand what life could offer. She wanted more, not necessarily wealth or status, but emotional growth, the freedom to explore her own potential, and the opportunity to be a mother who could teach Lucas more than just the practical lessons of life. The routine of caring for Michael and the home. Elisa's daily routine continued to be a balance between caring for Michael and Lucas. She cooked meals for Michael, preparing healthy and balanced dishes, always paying attention to his tastes and preferences. There was something profoundly comforting in the process of cooking for him, a way of caring for him, of giving back for the generosity he had shown her. However, Michael was not just an employer to Elisa, but also someone who needed special care due to an accident that left him with mobility challenges. He had physical limitations, and daily therapy sessions and exercises were part of his routine. Although he was much better than when Elisa had first found him, there were still days when he felt more tired than he would like to admit. Elisa was always by his side during these sessions, helping him stretch, monitoring his diet, and ensuring he didn't overexert himself. She noticed that as Michael grew stronger and more confident in his recovery, a kind of emotional dependency was developing between them. He trusted her in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. There was something much deeper and more complex unfolding between them. Sometimes, when she helped Michael rise from his wheelchair or complete his rehabilitation exercises, she felt that his physical and emotional fragility was creating a closer bond between them. The growth of a silent love. It was almost imperceptible, but the love between Elisa and Michael was growing organically. It wasn't a passionate or dramatic love, but something profound, built on the foundations of mutual respect and dependency. She felt that each day spent with him brought her closer to the man he truly was. Not just Mr. Redford, but the man with whom she began to dream of a future that encompassed not just their relationship, but also her role as Lucas's mother. Over the months, Elisa allowed herself to see how she was becoming an integral part of this family. She felt more capable, stronger, and more confident. And even when doubts about her place in that mansion arose, she knew something more important was happening. She was creating a home for Lucas and herself, a place where love was not limited to obligation, but was a choice made every day through simple gestures imbued with meaning. And despite all her insecurities and fears, Elisa knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. She was not just Michael Redford's son's mother or a caretaker for a wealthy elderly man. She was Elisa, a woman who, day by day, was building a life for herself, her child, and the family she was creating with Michael. The search, for inner peace. Yet even so, Elisa couldn't shake off one final question echoing in her mind, a question she knew only time could answer. Will I ever be truly happy, free from the scars of my past and the insecurities of my present? With her gaze fixed on little Lucas playing with his toys on the floor, Elisa took a deep breath and realized that the answer to that question was already there, right in front of her. The love of a mother, Michael's trust, Lucas's innocent smile, that was all she needed to start believing that inner peace would eventually come. And she knew that for that, the journey was just beginning. Michael and Elisa's wedding was not only a celebration of love, but also a landmark of transformation. What began as an act of generosity and compassion when Michael welcomed her into his home was now unfolding into a deep commitment, not just to her, but to the life they were building together. It was the end of a long journey of challenges and adjustments, but also the beginning of a new chapter, a new identity for both. The ceremony was carefully planned by Michael, and Elisa, though surprised by the grandeur of the preparations, felt that in that moment everything was being done for her and her new family. The Redford mansion, usually impeccably silent and solitary, was now becoming a vibrant place filled with activity. The house was brimming with flowers, white lilies, pink roses, golden daisies, that gave a fresh and natural air, contrasting with the richness of the environment. The banquet hall was adorned with luxurious details, golden velvet curtains, polished gold chairs, sparkling crystals on the tables, and floral arrangements in strategic spots, creating an elegant yet welcoming atmosphere. But what truly stood out was the feeling that the event was not just there to display Michael's wealth, but to celebrate the genuine love he felt for Elisa and the transformation they had both experienced together. The wedding dress and the first glance. Elisa's wedding dress was undoubtedly one of the most emotional surprises of the day. She, who had never considered herself a woman worried about details of luxury, found herself immersed in a unique experience. Michael, with his refined taste, had chosen a renowned designer to create the dress. When Elisa saw it for the first time, it was as if time had stopped for a moment. The dress was simple, yet immensely sophisticated, made of pure silk, with subtle lace details that seemed to float over the fabric, and a skirt that opened gracefully, covering her feet. It was the perfect balance of delicacy and power. The most special touch of the dress, however, was the long tulle veil, which extended to the floor, resembling a curtain of stars. When she put it on and looked in the mirror, Elisa no longer saw the vulnerable young woman who had arrived at the Redford mansion. She saw a strong woman, worthy of a love that had emerged from difficult circumstances, but was now becoming a true story of happiness. When Elisa entered the banquet hall, Michael's gaze found her instantly. He was there, waiting at the altar, with a huge smile and a sparkle in his eyes that Elisa had never imagined seeing in him. He was not just looking at the woman who was now his wife, but at the mother of his child, the woman who, with courage and love, had accepted not only the challenge of raising Lucas, but also becoming part of his life in an even deeper way. Michael's gaze was filled with a silent yet powerful emotion. For him, that moment was the realization of something that, although unplanned, had become the most important truth of his life. He no longer wanted to live without Elisa, without little Lucas, without the family that, in some way, he was beginning to see as the reason he had always worked so hard. Michael's commitment. When it was time for the vows, Michael looked at Elisa with a serious yet affectionate expression. His voice, soft but firm, resonated through the church. Elisa, what I began to feel for you was not something I expected. When you entered my life, I had no idea what was to come. But what I know now is that life without you and Lucas no longer makes sense. Not just because you bring me happiness, but because you show me what true strength and true love are. You are not just my wife. You are my partner, the woman who teaches me every day the meaning of family. I promise you, in front of everyone here, that I will stand by your side in all moments, both good and bad. My commitment to you goes beyond what words can express, because what we have built runs much deeper. These words touched Elisa's heart so profoundly that she felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She, who had questioned her place in Michael's life so many times, who still carried the scars of her past, now felt truly seen and valued. When it was her turn to speak, hesitation took hold of her for a moment, but looking at Lucas, who was sitting in the arms of one of the caretakers, and seeing Michael smile at her, Elisa found the strength to express what her heart already knew. "Michael," she began, her voice slightly trembling but clear, "love is something we never expect. But when it appears, it transforms everything. I know that from the moment you came into my life, I changed forever. When you offered me shelter, I thought I was only accepting help. But what you gave me was so much more. You gave me your love, your care, your trust. And now I give you my soul, my heart, my commitment to be your partner in all the days ahead. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I know that with you by my side, anything is possible." The two looked at each other intensely, as if nothing else existed beyond that moment. Emotion filled the room, and many of the guests watching the wedding were visibly moved. Some even discreetly wiped away tears, touched by the sincerity and depth of what they were witnessing. The kiss and the official union. When the vows were exchanged, a reverent silence filled the hall. Michael looked at Elisa with a serene smile full of emotion and slowly leaned in for the kiss that would seal their union. The moment was gentle, yet filled with significance. The kiss was not just the conclusion of a ceremony, it was the mark of a new journey beginning, an irrevocable commitment. Applause echoed through the church as Michael and Elisa pulled away, smiling at each other. There, under the warm gaze of friends and family, not only did their marriage begin, but also the commitment to a new family built on the foundations of love and resilience. The celebration and family gathering. After the ceremony, the celebration unfolded at the Redford mansion, which was beautifully decorated for the event. Tables were laden with delicious dishes, soft music played in the background, and laughter filled the spaces like never before. The children, including Lucas, looked stunning in their party attire, and the energy in the air was contagious. What Elisa felt as she looked at the table where her family was gathered was a sense of gratitude. She thought about her journey since the moment she arrived at Redford Mansion, lost and alone, and realized how much she had transformed. She was not just a wife now, she was a mother, a woman who found her place in the world, a woman who had learned to trust love again, even after so many wounds. The future with Michael. As the night wore on and the celebration began to wind down, Elisa stepped into the garden with Michael for a moment alone. The sky was starry, and a gentle breeze caressed their faces. They walked hand in hand, side by side, as equals, as partners. "Are you happy?" Michael asked softly, looking at her with a smile that radiated affection. Elisa took a deep breath, feeling the peace that now filled her heart. She looked at him, at the man she had chosen to spend the rest of her life with, and she knew that despite the obstacles, what they had now was solid and real. "Yes," she replied, squeezing his hand, "I am happy, and I know this is just the beginning." With that, Elisa knew that their marriage was not just a symbol of the love they had found, but also of the new beginning they were giving to their family. A family built on love, acceptance, and the promise that whatever the future held, they would face it together. Years later, the Redford mansion, with its grandeur and imposing silence, now resonated with the joy and energy of a true family. The hallways that once echoed with solitude were now filled with the laughter of children, hurried footsteps, and the soft sound of a piano playing in the background. The well-kept windows reflected a golden light that seemed to symbolize the peace they had attained, and each room, each hall, was filled with vibrant memories of everything they had overcome to reach that point. Elisa looked out the window of the main hall and smiled. Outside, the garden was impeccably maintained, but what truly caught her attention were the laughter of her children, Lucas and Benjamin, running across the lawn with their dog Rufus, a golden lab who loved to join in the fun. She knew that despite all the hardships she had faced in the past, this was her place now. She was a mother, a wife, but above all, she was part of a a family that had learned to rebuild and support one another. Daily life with Michael and the children. 6 years had passed since the wedding, and Elisa couldn't help but reflect on how her life had changed. Not just had the external circumstances transformed, but something profound within her had shifted as well. When she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman different from the young, helpless girl who once thought her future would be marked by abandonment and suffering. Now her eyes sparkled with the confidence that had once eluded her, and her posture radiated a serenity that only those who have weathered deep challenges and emerged from them can possess. Michael, her partner, was no longer the distant man of few emotions she had once known. He was now a present husband, a loving father, a man who not only provided for them, but also showed his dedication to the family through simple gestures. He cared for Lucas and Benjamin with the same patience and affection he showed Elisa. Countless times he would kneel to play hide-and-seek or join in on their impromptu competitions in the garden. Elisa watched him with a tender smile, finally feeling at peace for the first time in a long while. Elisa had also changed. She was now more involved in the local community, participating in charity events, and especially helping single mothers facing difficulties similar to her own. She used her own experiences as a starting point to offer emotional and practical support to other women who felt the weight of loneliness and adversity. Her bond with Lucas and Benjamin, now aged between 5 and 8, was strong and deep. The afternoons passed amidst stories, life lessons, and long walks around the city, where Elisa and Michael taught them about the world, but also about the value of being good people. The boys, full of energy, were very close to one another. Lucas, with his curious and attentive gaze, led their explorations, while Benjamin, the younger one, with his outgoing spirit and bright smile, followed his brother like a shadow. Rufus, their dog, was a loyal companion, always ready for a game or a sprint across the grass, reconciling with the past. Although life was now calm and the challenges of the past seemed distant, Elisa still carried within her a remnant of the pain from John's rejection. She had not seen him since the day he appeared at the mansion, challenging Michael and trying to undermine his confidence. However, over time, the pain of abandonment transformed into a strength that she used to protect her family. She knew that John had no place in her life anymore, but still, the resentment for everything he had done, the lies and broken promises, nestled in the depths of her heart. Curiously, there was a sense of relief when she realized that John would never be able to take away what she had built with Michael. Forgiveness, however, was still something she struggled to achieve. Elisa knew that to move forward without carrying that bitterness, she needed to fully accept her new reality and the man who was now her family. Michael, on the other hand, never seemed to look back. For him, Elisa and the boys represented the future, the present. He worried no longer about who she had been before, but about who she was now and what they were building together. It was on a quiet autumn afternoon that she finally found the peace she was seeking. As she watched Lucas and Benjamin play, a deep sense of gratitude washed over her. She knew that by her side was her true family. It was no longer just about her and what she had lost, but about everything she had gained: love, unity, and the chance to start anew. Michael's role in her life. Michael, the man who had rescued her in her moment of despair, was no longer just a benefactor. He had become her unconditional partner, and over the years, she had learned to love him not just as the man who supported her financially, but as the companion who understood her pain and shared with her all the moments of happiness and challenge. Michael loved her deeply, but what touched her most was the fact that he respected her. He respected her feelings, her individuality, and her journey. There were no longer grand, dramatic gestures of gratitude or passionate declarations from a man who wanted to save her. Instead, there was a silent trust, a mutual understanding that they had shaped and completed each other in ways that went beyond the surface. Michael's true strength lay in how he supported her decisions, respected her pace and choices, and was always there for her, without haste and without demands. Their relationship had evolved into a solid partnership, where both saw each other as equals. Michael was no longer the rich man who saved her, and Elisa was no longer the single mother he took in. They were, in fact, a team. The way Michael treated Lucas and Benjamin, with the same care and attention he dedicated to her, only reinforced the security Elisa felt. He loved the boys as if they were his own, and that, to her, was the greatest demonstration of love he could offer. Family life in harmony. Daily life at home unfolded with a quiet beauty. Mornings began with the aroma of fresh coffee wafting from the kitchen, where Elisa prepared breakfast for everyone. Michael, now older but with a vibrant energy when it came to caring for his family, read the newspaper while the kids animatedly chatted about school. They discussed the small challenges of day-to-day life, the friends Lucas and Benjamin had, and the nights were always filled with stories and laughter before bed. One spring morning, as Michael and Elisa walked through the garden, he paused for a moment and looked at her with a gentle smile. "Have you ever thought that everything we've been through was exactly what we needed to get here?" he asked, his voice filled with a serenity that stemmed from a deep sense of fulfillment. Elisa looked at him, her eyes sparkling in the sunlight. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she squeezed his hand and with a smile said, "Yes. And honestly, I wouldn't change a thing. Every challenge, every loss, every moment of doubt, all of it brought me here." They shared a silent understanding, knowing that what they were building wasn't perfect, but it was genuine. They were happy, and perhaps most importantly, they were together, a true family, ready for whatever life would throw their way. The future was filled with possibilities, and unlike what Elisa thought when she first arrived at Redford Manor, she finally understood. True happiness wasn't about escaping the challenges of the past, but embracing the opportunities to create something new, stronger, and more beautiful. They were more than survivors. They were a family built on love, trust, and resilience. And that was more than enough.